Greetings everyone around the globe, and I'm excited to welcome you to the first episode of our webcast made by humans, where we discuss the human genius behind fantastic business ideas and technological breakthrough. Today, I'm honored to sit with Ron Espinosa, Advanced Technology Solution Executive at Softchoice, a firm that provides software-focused IT solutions. Ron describes himself as a dot connector, strategist, evangelist, and author. Ron, I picked this up from your LinkedIn. And welcome to this interview. Hello, how are you?
Hey, doing well. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Roman. I appreciate it. I do get a lot of satisfaction of connecting dots and kind of listening between the lines, so to speak. So happy to be here and share whatever insights I might have.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ron. So, Ron, my first question would be, how do you keep on track or on the edge of all modern technology trends, and how you keep updated about everything that is going in technology space?
Yeah, so that's a daunting question, right? Because I don't know that anybody these days can stay on top of everything, but I try. And I try by keeping my network open, number one, because more eyes, more ears, you hear more, and then people will come back and say, oh, did you hear about this? Something I really like to do is connect with people, not just in a business or a sales setting, but connect with them just, hey, did you hear about this? And some type of technology, and people will come back to me when they hear about something, and it creates an open dialogue of brainstorming, and that's been really effective for me. Obviously, things like LinkedIn and joining groups, and I think I was one of the first people to join LinkedIn years and years ago, being involved with groups there. But I think now, post pandemic, getting back into the big trade shows and really starting to connect with people who are making a difference, both on the hardware and the software side, is really important. Obviously, having that open dialogue is also there. And sometimes you have to put your own self out there, right? You have to just say, hey, I had this crazy idea, and put it out into the social media world and see what comes back. And it's crazy the amount of links that I get. And then looking at the links, they may be from a different problem or a different perspective. But if you can look at technology as more of a bill of materials and less a bespoke solution, you can start to pull abstract ideas from it.
How do you find useful visiting different conference events in technology space? Is it something that would help you to stay on up to date about everything that's going on, or that's not the source that you would suggest to our audience?
It's a yes and no answer, I think. So yes, I think you have to be out in the conferences, and you have to be judicious about which ones you select, because time is our most precious asset. But what I try to do is look at things from an outcome base. So I have a core group of customers or verticals or horizontal solutions I might be building at a particular time. And so I look at it from a standpoint of, what am I trying to accomplish there? And then I start seeking out those experts in my network and beyond that may have a unique perspective on that or a point of view. And then I find out, where are they speaking? Where are they attending? Those types of things. And I try not to limit my scope for conferences or events to just the really, really big ones. Sometimes you can get a very small group together that's just a cohort that's investigating a technology, and it's really useful to get in and kind of just sit down at a dinner table and throw some ideas around.
Got it. How about some professional sources like Forbes, Gartner, HBR? Do you find them helpful to stay up to date, or would you recommend organizations to subscribe to those sources? Or you can find everything in just open source or Google or ChatGPT or anything else. What you take?
That's a really interesting question, especially with generative AI now storming the castle, so to speak. Do we need to have subscriptions? And are folks like Gartner and Forbes and subscription-based services like that at risk? Or is there a way to integrate the subscription model on a consumption basis into some type of open AI or generative app or whatever it might be? For me, I'm a bit of a dinosaur, so I go back to the days of reading magazines and newspapers. I have found that articles from Forbes, from Gartner, to be extremely helpful, especially when you can get behind the curtain and talk to the researchers themselves about what they're finding. But again, there's so much information, so much technology that I approach it from a business outcome standpoint, because I find that enables those folks, the researchers, to be more effective. But I am looking at ways that generative AI can go out and do the search for me, pull the articles in, and maybe you pay for them on a use basis, right? As I consume, I'll pay. But I haven't got rid of my subscriptions yet. No.
Got it. Got it. Cool. So, as I understand, you are the one who brings innovation to your company. So, is it correct?
I think it's a bunch of us, but I'm tasked with a few different things, and one of them is exploring industry solutions, establishing what those accelerators might look like, and then I work with the development team and the design team to kind of flesh those out to serve our customers. Yeah.
So that was exactly my next question. So how your company accepts new technology? How do you define to which technology invest or which technology explore more, and which of them is just like temporary hype?
Yeah, again, I feel like I sound like a broken record, but it's really customer based, right? What is going to serve the needs of the customer? And I think more so now than maybe going back to before the Industrial Revolution, we have that ability to really look at what the business problem is, what the customer needs, things that maybe a customer is not even saying yet, and investigate the technologies that can answer that. And so most times it's a suite of them, right? It's not a silver bullet, which I think we went through a phase in the technological revolution where it was buy this particular software package and it will solve these 20 problems or these 10 problems or these 2 problems. Now it's more like, what's the stack and how can it best be developed to produce this outcome? Or can we take what's already there and refine it? And so for me, the litmus test is where's the needle going to be moved for a human being or a group of human beings, and what technology will do that? And sometimes it could just be the discrete deployment of technology or a reconfiguring of what's already there.
Each new technology is some level of risk or something like uncertain or unknown well yet. So how to find the right balance? What would you recommend companies to find the right balance between being innovative from one side, but not to waste money on like something which is not that firmed in corporate world yet?
Yeah, something I've picked up on, I really appreciate this question. Something I've picked up on working with folks like Dr. David Vrumlin out of Texas is the notion of living into your purpose rather than your strategy. And you look at the story of Eastman Kodak, who at one point was one of the biggest companies in the world, and now is a fraction of the size they were. And you know the story there that they had the rights to digital printing and digital cameras and what have you, and kind of ignored it. They said they were a film company. No, they were a memories company, and their purpose got obfuscated by the strategy. Blockbuster, same thing, had a chance to buy Netflix and didn't, right? And because their strategy was make money from rewind fees and late fees, they forgot they were a home entertainment company. And so for me, when I'm looking at what's next, it's understanding very much your purpose and ignoring the strategy a little bit, because you can adjust the strategy to fit your purpose. So when you're looking at what to do next and staying nimble and being able to address your customers, I think that has to be first and foremost, right? What is my purpose? How best do I express that purpose into my customer base to keep their satisfaction as high as possible? And then the biggest advice that I can give to anybody is to measure twice, cut once, right? Once, as they say in the carpentry business, once the piece of wood is cut, you can't put it back on, right? It's out. So with technology, especially with the plethora of options these days, I think you must measure twice, cut once. And what I mean by that is get a team of people that can do the design work for you, that can do the discovery, product design, service design, experience design. That's a big one. And then once you have that and it's mapped to your purpose, the technology kind of takes care of itself.
Got it. Got it. What are the top 3 technologies that are appearing right now in the market will change the game for Fortune 500 companies in upcoming years from your perspective?
I mean, you can't ignore generative AI, right? I mean, the things that are coming out of this is just, it's mind-boggling. And I think that I could give points 1, 2, and 3 to it, right? Because certainly there's security that has to be factored in. But if I have to give you 3, I'm going to say 1 is generative AI. But then the next 2 are a little less about technology and a little bit more about thought process, going back to my previous point, considering design. So one, security by design in any
Mhm.
technology you deploy from the ground up. Otherwise, you're going to leave yourself wide open. And this one is something I don't know that many people are thinking about. I really hope they are, but it's the ethics. You have to get yourself an ethics consultant. If you're going down the road of automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning, generative artificial intelligence, all of that, it's no longer a question of can I do it? It's a question of should I do it? And what are the potential ramifications? People joke around about Skynet and the Terminator, but I don't know that we're far off in certain ways when you start thinking about the possibilities. And also when you're using something like a ChatGPT or a Bard or something along those lines, thinking about the question you want to ask is very important, because if you ask a generic question, you'll get a very wide open fire hose answer. So I think we're going to have to start considering more and more the way we ask questions, the way we think about our applications, the way we think about software and technology. And we really have to start thinking about the should rather than the can.
Look, Ron, this is really interesting topic, and that's something that we also, from our experience, many clients are interested in, like this generative AI and application of different AIs in their business. But the question about ethics. So what would be your suggestion? So how would you approach from organizational perspective this ethical question of usage of AI? What questions should C-level or executives should ask themselves or their technology team before using those technologies?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is you have to have a very clear outcome in mind. Like, what are you trying to do? And does it make a difference for the people that it's meant to serve, whether those are internal employees, internal customers, vendors, partners, or external customers? What is the end in mind? So start there, right? It's the old Stephen Covey thing, right? Begin with the end in
Yeah.
mind. And then challenge yourself to make sure that everything that you're doing is tied to that end result. And remember that one of the biggest parts of creating a strategy is where to say no. So again, just because I can ask generative AI to go out and design something and pull me back information, let's say on all my employees' social media, right, to see what's trending so that I can be a better employer because people are talking about a certain topic. I want to be in tune with that. Maybe that's ethically not the right thing to do because of all the other information you could be pulling in. So now you have to weigh the benefits versus the risks. And so that's kind of an extreme example, I think, but there's so many nuances that have to be considered at the C level to say, what are our principles? What are we trying to accomplish? Where do we draw the line? And why are we drawing the line? And again, that's that purpose versus strategy. And if you really live into that purpose and you stick to that, I think the strategic pieces the questions will become more readily apparent. But things to consider are, again, we're talking about intelligence, artificial or not, it's intelligence. If you wouldn't ask it to someone's face, I suggest not asking the machine to go ask it.
Yeah, that's really true. And like the question that many companies has, and sometimes they do hesitate to ask them out loud, is basically how I can save cost using AI, which from other side means whether I can cut certain team members or employees and substitute them with AI. So what's your take on this question or request first, like from ethical standpoint, maybe your predictions, or how would you foresee that AI may change the job market in general?
Yeah, this is a really topical question. I think I've had this question raised in my last 3 or 4 social setting conversations where people are
Mhm.
saying, what do you think about this? And, there's a clamor out there right now that all AI development should stop for 6 months, right?
Mhm.
And I just can't agree with that. And the reason is, when we found out through medicine that we could do surgery rather than bleeding people out to relieve certain conditions, we didn't say let's not do that. We explored and we pushed forward. And then when we found out that we could do certain surgeries without being invasive, we didn't stop. We went there and we made it better. And I think that's what we really have to look at here is where can technology, AI in particular, help make things better for people? And I think one of the key areas that it can do it is by freeing people up to do what people do best, which is think, which is react, which is to have empathy, to have sentience. These are things that machines will never have, or not for the foreseeable future, I don't think. But when you look at what technology can do for a company, I don't think the answer should be, how can we cut cost? I think rather the question is, what things are we doing today that are labor intensive that we're doing simply because we've always done it that way, or because some advancement in our business forced us into adding a couple of extra processes, which had us add a couple of new people? Well, we can now streamline that by putting in new technology. That shouldn't automatically mean that the people that are there are going to go anywhere. I would offer that the technology still needs the human beings to be in the loop and be notified. Hey, validate this, right? We're not 100% sure that this document says what I think it says. Can you check this? And now you can elevate the level of employee satisfaction because they're doing more meaningful work. And so I see technology as an enabler to increase the morale of your team, improve the efficiencies, which should help you drive top and bottom line revenues.
Absolutely makes sense. And from your perspective, which industries could win more from application of this kind of generative AI technologies in their business? So which business domains might get the maximum outcome out of this?
I don't know who doesn't benefit, but I understand your question. I think that document heavy companies who have a lot of regulation, so financial services, inclusive of insurance, healthcare for certain, because when you start thinking about, and I know of customers who are doing this, when you can start using AI to process the petaflops of data out there around disease, what could be the potential outcome for cures and treatment and admitting patients and treatment of patients and what have you? What happens when pharmaceuticals can start leveraging this technology to find new chemical compounds to do different work, or to make different drugs work? But then you get into things like farming. And I was recently talking with a company that does a lot of growing, and they said, as we were talking, they said, we hadn't thought about it, but it looks like this could really help us looking at genetics and different types of compositions they could make to make plants more robust in different temperatures, maybe optimize the water flow. There's so many applications. But I think that anywhere where there's an intensive amount of documentation that has to be processed can get a big win here. And I think anywhere where there's opportunity to try new permutations that would take human beings years to do. You have to remember, this is like every instance is like having 100,000 eyes looking at something and processing it every second of every day, and getting smarter by every action and reaction that happens.
Yeah, that's interesting to see how the future from movies actually come to our real world, how those Skynets and other networks actually became our reality day after day.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny about that is that I sometimes wonder, as I've gotten older, were the movies that I watched growing up that suggested certain things were possible, was that the inspiration for so many people who are now making those things possible? It's the people asking, why can't I do that? Why not? What if we did that? What if we tried this other thing? And there's been a lot of failures, but people learn from them. And so they're no longer failures, they're building blocks, right? If you leave it alone, it's a failure. And I just want to know when someone's going to make a proper lightsaber. So that's it.
That's true. That's true. Look, my next question would be about intellectual property rights. So majority of those generative AI, basically they generate the content. And the reasonable question, who owns this content in these circumstances? Was it that the person who creates the prompt, or those people who created this AI algorithm? So what's your take on how you see that growing interest to this generative AI topic may change the legislation of the countries, or basically just impact on our overall understanding of what is IP means, what is the intellectual property?
It's a really interesting question, and one we're going to have to wrestle with, but we've been here before, right? We've found that legislation, especially in the US, will lag behind the technology. I think you're going to see more and more of that because technology is just evolving so quickly. The things we can't even contemplate right now. How do you legislate against it or regulate it to put some rails around it? I don't think you can. But what I do think we can do is we can start to think about, there's a legal concept in the US called the reasonable man, right? So what would the reasonable man do? So I'll give you an example. 30 years ago, it wouldn't be reasonable to think that somebody should pull out their cell phone and make a phone call because they saw a car accident, right? They wouldn't, that's not reasonable. Because 30 years ago, everyone didn't have phones. Now, with mobile phones being ubiquitous, it is more reasonable. So maybe there's a case to be made for liability. And so I think that what's reasonable is something we have to look at. So many different ways to answer this, right? So I think that I have to stop there, that we have to start injecting. We can't count on the governments to regulate. We can't count on legislation. We have to do what's reasonable. We have to have a reason for doing what we're doing. And I think that we also have to have a purpose behind what we're doing and why we want to do it. And then it's a question of being brave enough to pull back and say, you know what, we went down this road. There's some really interesting stuff out there, but no, we're not going to do that because it's raising this issue or it's introducing certain bias. And when I start looking at intellectual property, when I think about it through that lens, intellectual property gets really dicey. So for instance, you and I are recording this conversation. I'm sharing information with you, you're sharing information with me with the idea that it'll be put into some type of interview and some results. But we both agreed to that in advance. Who owns the intellectual property to this conversation? I would argue neither of us, right? If I'm having a conversation with you and two friends at a coffee shop, we're exchanging ideas freely. There's no intellectual property. However, somebody walks by and hears the four of us talking about some great idea, takes it and runs out and gets it published. Is it their intellectual property now? So I don't think that the conversation is unique to AI or unique to technology itself. I think the question is more around the uniqueness of the idea. Number one, I have to say that I think intellectual property, the term is way overused right now. Everybody thinks that they've got something novel. The question is it in fact novel, and can it be defended in a court? And if it's not really intellectual property. It's just a cool idea you thought you had. But when to answer your question more directly, when I feed that intellectual property, my ideas, into a ChatGPT interface, and it goes out and pulls everything back for me, can I publish that without a disclaimer that say found using ChatGPT? I don't think that's ethical. I think I have to, right? So there's that piece of it. The other side, I think, is that we've lived with this idea forever when you think about music and songwriting, right? So if I sit down at a piano and I do, I play a piece by Bach, I've gotten really, really good at it. I'm just playing Bach's music. It's his, right? I'm just using it. However, if I go to the next level and I'm thinking, I'm going to write my own music, but I've been influenced by Bach, how much of that needs to be mine? How much can I say is mine and how much can I say is his? And I think where we've gotten to the point is that it's just irrelevant, right? The creator is the person who had the idea, or the music in this case, and they took into account various influences. I don't think you can avoid influences. None of us live in a bubble.
I really like your analogy with music and intellectual property in IT. So that really, I think, very too close world. And yeah, that makes total sense from my perspective.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about music too is that, so you take popular music, right? There's basic rhythm and blues, and in you have your 1 chord, your 4 chord, your 5 chord, and that's just a standard framework, let's call it, right? Well, is that any different than a technology stack or ChatGPT as the framework? But now what becomes mine is I use that 1, 4, and 5, and I make nuanced melodies over it, or certain harmonies, or I change the words, or I could take one person's song and change 1 or 2 notes and it becomes mine. So I think that we have to start thinking about AI in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. Can you give a few like examples how you use ChatGPT or any other NLPs right now, or like some of your recent usage, how they become part of your daily life or not yet?
Not so much, I don't know, it's daily life, although I'm starting to see some implications. So we're looking at some things around what I'm finding fascinating is the interrogation, right? So I'm sure you've seen the big example people put out, pirates walking out of a painting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So if I said, I want a picture, draw me or paint me, create me a picture of pirates walking out of a painting, I get 72,000 versions of it, right? Now this is where I go down that line of getting better questions to get better results. Design me, create me a picture of 4 pirates walking out of a painting, one with a parrot, one with a peg leg, one with an eye patch. I want it to be red velvet with a diamond, and I want one to be choking the other one. Now I get a different output. So when we start thinking about how that applies in business, right? It's design me a system workflow that makes my document processing better. You're going to get something that's, this wide, and it'll be good, but it won't have any context. If you can design me a process that extracts the salient data points, and here's what they are from this mortgage document, which then results in processing, map it to these data sources that can then validate the application, you're going to get a much better result. And so those are the things that I'm starting to play with now is with the design teams, is really elevate their importance and really stress it to our customers that we have to get to a point where we understand those questions. Because again, it's not, can I build you this app? The app can build the app, but we need to tell it what to build. And we need to be very, very incredibly specific.
Yeah, so basically this is just another way how you can write the code. Instead of like following a certain script, you just need to be strong in writing proper prompts for AI and use it like instead of IDEA or any other console, you can use ChatGPT or anything similar for creating new apps or new software products.
Yeah, and the danger that comes with that, and I think we've seen this, right? We used to have to go and write mainframe code, and then we had to write, PHP was all the rage for a while, and then we got a lot more into low code, no code. This is just that next step. However, results are coming so fast back to the user that it becomes very, very easy to say, ooh, problem solved, and move on, and not put the proper diligence into the potential implications of what could have come out of that. I think there was an old story that you can look up about Microsoft and their first bot, right? Their first AI-powered bot. It developed some rather interesting tendencies very quickly, right?
Yeah.
Because some things probably weren't fully explored or understood. And so I think we have to make every effort to continuously be vigilant in understanding what the technology is doing and investigating, interrogating, is it doing what it was intended to do? Is it pushing us closer to our purpose?
Ron, probably the last question from my side for today. So we saw that basically this boom of generative AI were mostly created by OpenAI with their ChatGPT daily. Then it was like, now it's picked up by Microsoft. So Microsoft is like trying to integrate this in multiple products like Bing. So we'll see it in the office. So what's your feeling? What would be the response from Google, from AWS, from Amazon? So how and in what form we should expect to see those kind of solutions in global cloud providers?
Yeah, I think you're going to see more of what you've been seeing. So interestingly, this week I saw a post. AWS has now opened a generative AI startup accelerator that obviously will run in AWS. Google also this week had a bunch of announcements at their data summit around incorporating Gen apps and generative AI into various components of Google Cloud Platform. I think that the distinguishing point you're going to see is what you've seen already out of the major hyperscalers. Some are going to be very integrated into their product set, like Microsoft has their 365 platform, and so everything gets integrated there. Keeping in mind, of course, Microsoft also has OpenAI separate of its core platform. So there are elements that you can have within, and there are things that you can still do with OpenAI outside. But they're looking at it as how can it augment their licensing. 180 degrees on the other side of the spectrum is Google, that says, we're not going to necessarily force you into a product. We're going to open the doors and say, everything is open, come use our stuff. Now, what they're going to do, and Google's always kind of taken this approach, is we're going to give you value by giving you access to the models we've trained and accelerate your ability to adopt certain things. So I think it's just a question, as a company, where am I in my maturity curve? Where am I in my commitment to certain things? If I'm a Microsoft shop with a heavy licensing presence of 365, then my natural path would be to continue down an open AI integration and kind of push Microsoft to help you explore. And what can you do? And certainly firms like ours do that. On the flip side, if I'm more in a what's possible, what could I do here mode, and I want to be a little more nimble, then maybe I look at a Google and what can I do with them? And in many cases, what's the best of breed coming out of AWS, Google, and Microsoft, and how do I make them work together?
Got it. Thank you very much, Ron. Thank you for joining this interview format. And yeah, look forward to meet for our upcoming endeavors. Thank you.
Yeah, same here. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invite.